Thank you, Manos and Manos, for inviting me. It's genuinely a real pleasure to be here. And I'm going to chat to you about the development of a specialized curriculum and how hopefully it can help advance shoulder surgery around the world. I had to go back to the hotel earlier when I started watching, and I had to do my disclosures because I forgot to do that. So I have three. One, I work for ESCA, so I am almost certainly biased towards the things that we do for education. Hopefully you don't hold that against me. Hopefully you will engage with us and get behind it. Two, I'm a teacher, not a surgeon. So if you have any questions later, please don't make them technical ones. I will not be able to help you. I also believe firmly and passionately that education is something we should carry on throughout our lives, and I guess that's a bit of a bias. And three, I am a potential patient of yours. So I want any surgeon who works on me to be the absolute best version of themselves, who knows the absolute most that they can. But it seems logical to me, seeing as we are in Athens, one of the hubs of learning throughout the millennia, that we would perhaps use the words of someone who can say it better than I can. And for my Greek friends, this is apparently this phrase in ancient Greek. I apologize, my colleague translated it for me, so if she has mistranslated or if she said something else, I'm sorry. But this should say, education is the kindling of a flame and not the filling of a vessel. And I agree with this wholeheartedly. I think education is a lifelong thing. It's a fire that we have to keep fueling. We don't want you to just fill it up to a certain point and then say, tick, I know everything now, I'm done, I don't need to do any more. So I think we need to keep fueling that fire. But especially for orthopedic surgery, because it has to constantly evolve. As we know, times are changing, and as Manos just said there at the end, AI is coming into play, we're encountering new technology, and so on and so on. We're experiencing different ways of communicating with our patients, sometimes through social media as well. Societal changes are a big part of things, and the economic landscape, as we know, globally is completely changing. The cost of procedures is rising quite dramatically. And perhaps one of the most important ones is that patient expectations are changing. And I'll be interested to see if any of you in the room have encountered this. I know that Ruth mentioned it earlier in her talk, that some people come in and say, I want the procedure that's going to get me back in 3 months, not in 6 months. So I'm intrigued to know how many of you have encountered someone who's come into your room and said, I've Googled what's wrong with me, and I think you should do that. So in this new kind of age of orthopedic surgery and what patients know, does our education keep pace? And can we do anything to improve it? And this is a question that went back a long time ago to the 2012 to 2014 ESCA board, and they said they wanted to find out. So they conducted some research amongst their membership, and they wanted specifically to find out what those people thought their educational needs were. And this phrase really jumps out from the paper that was published by Lind in 2020, and it said, it appeared that postgraduate and subsequent super specialization and training were insufficiently structured and standardized across Europe. So they had a problem, and that's one of the key things with education. We've got a problem, how do we fix it? So how do you address it? Oh, well, it's easy, they said. Don't worry about it. We'll design a curriculum. No problem. We'll lay the foundations. We're going to say that we're going to split it into major joints. We're going to have the knee, shoulder, we'll group foot and ankle together, we'll do hip, we'll have wrist and elbow, and then just for a little bonus at the end, we'll do a sports and exercise medicine section. But it took 4 years from the research until they got to this basic concept. And so curriculum design, I'm here with my teacher hat on, and I can tell you that that's not such an easy thing. Not so fast. And how does a mouse eat an elephant? It might seem like a strange question, but the reality is that's how you have to approach curriculum design. What type do you want to use? Is it subject-centered? This is like we learn maths in school. 4 times 4 is 16. We don't have any creativity around that. That's the rule, that's the law. When you times that by that, that's the answer you get. Were we going to create a subject-centered curriculum? Or was it going to be learner-centered? Were we going to allow people a chance to have personal goals that they could adapt and adjust as they went along? Or were we going to be problem-centered? Now, this is a very niche way of approaching a curriculum. It's incredibly difficult to design a problem-centered curriculum. They're very rare. They normally look at something like, say, global warming. This is our problem. How are we going to solve something very specific like that? And the truth is that we would aim for a combination, but it would be quite weighted. It would be weighted towards learner and subject-centered. So it took 4 years, roughly, to get the curriculum together. And 4 years ago, we launched the ESCA core curriculum. We call it a living document because we constantly assess it, and twice a year we revise it and we update it. At the moment, it stands at 285 core competencies. This is what our sections and our working groups got together and said, these are the fundamental things that you need to know across all of those areas of orthopedic surgery. We consider it an educational roadmap, something that teachers, but perhaps more importantly, students can use. But to make life a little bit easier, we split it into essential, very important, and then important topics. So if you had a little bit of time and you were trying to improve your rotator cuff repair skills, you'd go to the essential section on rotator cuff repair. But once we had the curriculum, we wanted to know, are we kind of using it properly? Are we doing the right thing? And so we thought we'd try to assess people with it. And that's where I come into play a little bit more, because I was hired to work specifically on this program, the ESCA European Certification Program. It launched about 1.5 years ago. And it's an assessment-focused certification, and it's all based on the core curriculum. How are you assessed? Well, 3 ways. In stage 1, we look at your theoretical knowledge. Do you really know the fundamentals, but also the cutting-edge techniques, the newest research that's out there? Are you aware across all the bases? And if you are, can you then pass a 50-question multiple-choice exam? You have 3 months to study for it, and you get a maximum of 3 attempts. In stage 2, and this is the one that everyone gets excited about because we go to a cadaver lab, are your surgical skills up to scratch? It's an in-person assessment. You get your own cadaver specimen, and it's time restricted. Can you perform specific techniques to the absolute highest level? And then stage 3, and from the potential patient side of things, this is the one that interests me the most. How good is your clinical reasoning? Can you take the information from stage 1, and can you take your skills that you've demonstrated in stage 2, and do you know when to apply them, and how to apply them for the best outcome for your patient? And now you might recognize some of these people. I know I see some of these friendly faces here today. These are the faculty who were the in-person assessors for our rotator cuff module. And people will say, haters will say that this is photoshopped, but Mustafa Karahan was the module chair for that. Unfortunately, couldn't be with us at that event, but he definitely made it into the photo. These are some of the people behind the scenes. We've run 10 modules so far, and out of those 10 modules, we've had over 100 experts involved from all over the world. When you add their collective surgical experience together, that comes to 2,500 years of orthopedic surgery between them. So this makes me feel confident in how robust our program is, how well informed it is. But the participants, this might interest you a little bit more. Who takes part? I'm standing here waxing lyrical and saying it's fantastic, but as we know, I'm biased. It's an ESCA program. 600 surgeons from over 75 countries around the world have applied. And we've taken forward 180 of those applications over 10 modules so far. From the shoulder side of things, we've run the rotator cuff module so far, it's almost complete. We will run the shoulder instability module. It will open for application in May, and then the module launches in July. And then Manos, you're in charge from then on. I'll just do the paperwork. And then shoulder arthroplasty will be coming soon. But a little more about the rotator cuff one. If we look, we had 50 applicants and we chose 18. They came from 14 different countries. It's actually been the most diversely populated module that we've had so far. All 18 passed the theory, with the second highest kind of cohort grade of all, with 41.64 out of 50. But I enjoy looking at human behavior, and this first one makes me chuckle all the time. Everyone who attempted their first theoretical assessment without looking at the learning resources failed. So as a teacher, I would tell my students, go home, study, look at the resources, and you'll do well in your exam. And I think that carries over quite well in this instance, because those who did review 90% or more of the resources, they passed at their first attempt, and they also had the higher grades in the module. But this is all a moot point, because when we get into the operating room, what are their hands-on skills like? And so the module faculty decided they would assess 9 different kind of surgical sections. And you can see them there. I won't try and talk you through them because, to be honest, I only marginally understand half of those procedures, but I am assured that they are all correct and related to rotator cuff. We took 17 people to the CAD lab by Rimesis in Cologne. One person couldn't make it. We were sponsored by Zimmer Biomet, and that was very kind of them. But only 14 participants successfully passed. The average grade out of a maximum of 40 was 27.1, or 3.39 out of 5 per domain. 3 out of 5 was considered competent, and they're still awaiting stage 3. In stage 3, they'll present a case study. It'll be highly detailed, pre-op, post-op follow-ups. And now we ask the question, what made you choose that option? We don't say why, because why makes people defensive. If I say to you, why did you wear that suit today? You go, why not? But if I say, what made you think of this? You say, well, actually, I was inspired by this piece of data or that piece of data. So this is the Socratic method, and we like to use it. But we're always asking, does this work for the patient? And some previous modules have revealed some really interesting decision-making processes. And I know that from feedback from the faculty, this is their favorite part. This is the most rewarding part of the module for them, because they actually enjoy the discussion. And from what I've seen today, people enjoy the discussion amongst themselves here in the ring or at the end of the presentations. So I said I'd talk about how this will help progress shoulder surgery. And so what do you do with the certification? And I would say join a section or a society, maybe your national society, maybe one of the ESCA sections. You can drive your memberships in those societies, and you can get more surgeons involved. Many minds can come up with many ideas. Not all of them will be great, but some of them will be. You can become a teacher, spread that knowledge around. You can apply for ESCA teacher status. You may not get it, you might. You can become a faculty member. Use your experience. Maybe you'll be up here on stage. You can kind of progress the learning. You can attend the Athens shoulder course. These are all things that you can do after you take one of our certifications. But where will ESCA go from here, and what will we try to do? Well, we have a 2-year follow-up with participants coming up pretty soon. We start that study in July, and it will progress over the next 12 months. It'll be qualitative. To try and develop the program, we will look to publish that paper. I would imagine it will take us probably about 18 months from now. We'll bring in external verifiers, people who are not biased like me, who have not worked for ESCA. We will bring them in, and we will see if our assessment practices are robust, if we're assessing what we're supposed to be assessing, if we're doing it the right way and the fair way. And then quite long term, we're probably talking closer to 10 years down the line, we're curious as to whether we can gain university affiliations. Can some of these modules become eligible for postgraduate study credits? Is this something that we can make a uniform act? And then I suppose the last thing, it would be remiss for me to say all this without saying you could also come and progress this at the ESCA Congress in Milan as well. But thank you so much for giving me a stage to chat about this and for giving me the time. It's been a genuine pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, very much for your talk. Do you have any question, any comment? Do you want some clarification? Yes, Professor Georgoulis.
Thank you for this nice presentation and for the analysis of the concept. But I am wondering why the people felt when they didn't take in consideration what you wrote. Or that means that the people, they are commenting, they have something different in their mind, or they have a knowledge from their universities or from their clinics, and then you want to know exactly what you want that the people have to know.
I think that's an excellent point. From a data point of view, we can assess the answers that they chose to the questions. And so if it was a case of a poorly formed question, we can see if that's the case, and we can adjust that. On a personal point, I think that a lot of the reasons why we have slip-ups are because people enter the assessment phase and there's a bit of ego. They think, I don't need to study to pass this, and they just dive straight in and they attempt it. And also, as I said, we're looking not just at the fundamentals of the procedures, we're also looking at the cutting edge research, the latest techniques and information. And so I think that people, when they do dive straight in and they don't look at the resources, maybe they know everything up to 6 years ago, up to 4 years ago, maybe up to 2 years ago, but maybe they're not as up to date with the papers that were published in the last 2, 3, or 4 years. And so I think that's probably where people are falling down. We have a split between people who just miss passing the theory attempt on their first go, who are maybe 1 or 2 marks away, and then the catastrophic failures, the people who get less marks than I get on the assessments. And I attempt all of the theory assessments, and I'm not a surgeon, and some people score lower than me, and I think it's because they just jump straight in without preparing.
Alex.
From Belgium. Thank you for the presentation. It's really a strong curriculum. I'm also part of the CSIC committee, so that's another one. There is also a curriculum from the German group. The Effort has a proposal of curriculum. What's your point of view on the different curriculums of the different European societies? And at the end, what will be the goal? Would there be one European certificate, or what's your viewing point on that?
It's an excellent question. It's quite interesting because when I came into this from the world of education, there's this idea that we want people to progress all together. We want people to improve their skills and their knowledge. And from an education point of view, it can be quite like a campfire situation. Let's bring everyone in together and warm everyone together. When I moved into the medical education field, it seems that some societies and organizations can be quite combative with each other and say, our curriculum is better than this one. And so from my point of view, I think that it would be beneficial if all these groups get together and work together to drive on the medical education so that the patient is the person who benefits. I could be mistaken, but I do believe out of the kind of 100-odd people who are working on our modules, we have had crossover between the societies and the different groups. It may not be at the highest level, but we are bringing over some kind of crossover of information. It's also a kind of a work in progress, and we know that we're in the pilot kind of first 2 years of our program. And as I said, the core curriculum is a living document. So if there is something going on with the other organizations and it's turning out to be far better, then if they're amenable to telling us about it, then I'm not afraid for us to say, like, hey, listen, that's a great idea. Why don't we incorporate that into ours? And why don't we think about it? I think education works best when it's approached with a completely open mind and a completely open hand of friendship, rather than a defensive position of don't look at my work, kind of like kids when they're in school writing an exam. I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it works.
Very nice perspective. That's also my idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben, this is the wonderful attempt to make the education imparting to all the delegates across Europe. My question is a little different. Is this certification course in today's medico-legal era, can it stand as a support at the level of skill? Can you put this course certification as a part of your medical legal document to support the level of the skills I bore, or it's just a training and educational purpose?
So this goes back probably to the last kind of point about the university partnership or affiliation. At present, it's kind of an industry standard qualification. And it's ESCA saying that we rate your skills to this level. There's also CME credits with each module as well and things like that. So there is recognized learning involved from a bigger organization, but the reality is that if we want a globally attributable certification program, then something like a university affiliation will work. And in my opinion, what will happen is you will gain a section of perhaps, just as we were discussing about it there, like maybe German-speaking universities affiliate it, and then it moves out and it grows from there until eventually maybe a pool of universities are recognizing it and including it perhaps in some of their medical education. But that's a long burner. That's a long one, and to have anything affiliated with the university takes a lot of data and a lot of time. So I wouldn't imagine that we will get there for another kind of 7 or 8 years minimum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I have a question? Ben, congrats. Wonderful presentation. So my question for you is, do you think that there's a space to somehow evolve to more specific modules? What I mean is, we've been here discussing all day about advanced techniques, and some people argue that you have a learning curve for this technique to get this result, and if you want a good result with this technique, you should send the patients to centers in which there are surgeons who do a lot of these techniques. So my point is, do you think it makes sense that a society like ESCA can certificate a surgeon to do a specific technique?
That's a tough question. I thought we were friends. We had to bring up the toughest question a lot. I believe that this certification program will only work if it is something that progresses with the development of techniques. So I think we will continue to provide, for instance, the ACL module looking at, can you perform hamstring grafts, bone patella bone, LET, things like this. We'll continue to do that, but if new techniques become applicable in any of the modules, then we will possibly assess whether they are something that is going to be applied on a day and daily basis. So if a new technique becomes applicable for rotator cuff and it becomes the trend, that will probably have to be inserted into the module. We already are reconsidering rebuilding one of our modules because we don't think it reflects necessarily the correct techniques. So I think the modules will cater to the techniques that are applied most frequently for most surgeons, along with some of the specialized stuff. I do feel like there will be scope for a very small number of participants further down the line to potentially take on kind of a certificate of excellence, something that looks at the really demanding techniques, the 1 in the 100 type cases technique that comes up. But that's a very small number of surgeons who would perhaps be capable of it or perhaps ever need to use it. And finding the faculty to assess that would be very difficult. I think that it will be, that would genuinely be a very difficult one for us to assess fairly, because what is the flavor of the month now and very advanced now might suddenly be disregarded 3 years later. So I think we are using techniques in our assessments that are considered reliable and definitive techniques at the moment, but we do address it. And after every module, we address the techniques, and then the plan is that every 2 years we kind of amp up each module every 2 years, and we look again to see if we need to refresh anything. So I don't feel like I got the answer to your question there, but I hope it helps a little.
But I'm not finished yet.
Oh.
Still, regarding that point, do you think it maybe could make sense to have, before the certification module, an option to educate before certificate? What I mean is, if there's a very specific technique that someone usually does, but also needs to refine, can they choose to take 1 or 2 courses directed and then at the end take the certification?
Now we can be friends again, because that's a lovely question and one that I can answer quite happily. I think that the certification program is not just a capstone for your knowledge. It's not just an ability for you to say, I know how to do this and I can do it well. We should also then be able to look at the results from the certification modules and say, actually, you know what? People were really struggling with this technique. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that knowledge, we're going to go back to the faculty and the sections, and we're going to say, hey, it would be really helpful if sometime in the next 12 months you run a course where you educate people on this technique. Because if you can do that, then the objective for us is not to fail people on the certification module. It's also not to say, you've paid your money and there, you get your certificate. We're holding standards there. Our objective, though, is to see if we can elevate people's game so that they reach these standards. And I think the certification program can fuel our kind of courses and the educational component, but it can do it in a really targeted way. At the moment, maybe we're teaching people stuff that they already know how to do for 80% of the course, and the 20% that they really want to learn, maybe we could flip that around if we have the right information. And that's something that, Michael, Bertha, you don't know about this yet, but that's actually something that's in my board meeting presentation for the next board meeting. So thank you for that.
But so far, this is the idea of the certification program. I mean, to certify surgeons that are capable to do a specific procedure in a specific joint. So in an ideal world, what you said, I mean, to prepare these people through courses, this is what we would like to do, but you have to take into account the resources of the society, etc. So otherwise, this would be the ideal, let's say, way to go.
Thank you for your contribution, but Anna Katarina will never stop asking, so please stop. Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much. I'm a little jealous because you received more questions than me. Yeah. And many of us talking, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.